Good afternoon to all of you. It's my pleasure to be here. I met Stan earlier and reminded me of our team back in San Antonio, Texas, a group of people who I am humbled to be a part of. But Stan and his team are very committed and dedicated, and that's the first thing that you pick up after talking with him for a few minutes. And so with that, I am honored to be here this afternoon. My name is Johnny Zamarripa, and I am part of an organization called Outcry in the Barrio. And it is an organization, it is a spiritual growth center with over 200 centers all over the world that reaches out to drug addicts, to criminals, to anyone who is struggling with all kinds of life addictions. The subject matter that is being discussed here today about reversing the crisis of the American family touches me very personally. I was raised in a family that was determined for life to be better for me than it was for my parents and for my grandparents. Such so that they gave me a non-Hispanic first name, which was Johnny, should have been Juan. But they wanted so much for me not to have the kind of life that they had, a life that was difficult and laborious. And so they did their best to work and made a way for me to go to school, public school, private school, all of my life, all the way up till I graduated from Our Lady of the Lake University in San Antonio. The very last day of our schooling, was in the mid-'70s, and there had been this gush of funds that the government had just released for programs to fight the war on drugs. And so on the final day of school, there were about 8 executive directors from the San Antonio, South Texas area, and they came to present their programs. And each of them was wanting to recruit the graduates to work in their centers. And so all 8 spoke for a few minutes. And they talked about how determined they were to eradicate drug abuse in their communities. Our professor was the last one to come up. And he said, well, these gentlemen here are the executive directors in these areas, and you can speak to them afterwards. And I'm sure they'll be glad to talk to you about, your careers. He says, and there's one more guy, didn't show up today, but he's trying to work with drug addicts. He's a preacher, and his name is Freddy Garcia. And with that, he dismissed us all. Well, I went to work the following month after graduation at a community center. And 5 years later, with 2 children, wanted to bail out of my family. I wanted the American dream so bad. I was taught how to make a living, but I was never taught how to live. And if we want to build families, we've got to build individuals. We've got to build individuals not by only teaching them how to make a living, but by teaching them how to live. I was educated, but I didn't know how to live. I had 2 children, but didn't know how to live with them. I was married, didn't know how to live with my wife. I didn't know what it took to be a father. I didn't know what it took to be a husband. I was never taught that in all of my life. Now, I come from an endearing family, but I've never really grasped that like I should have grasped it. 5 years after being married, I told my wife, listen, I don't have anything inside of me to give you anymore. But I'm going to move out, and I'm going to take care of you guys as best as I can. And, you go about your life, I'll go about mine. That same night, a friend of mine comes knocking on my door, a friend that I hadn't seen for a long time. And he said, Johnny, how are you? And I said, I'm doing fine. Little did he know that I had just made a decision to leave my family. He started talking to me about Jesus. And at the end of the night, he said, listen, I'm going to come by for you in the morning. I want to take you to church with me. Because he was an old friend, I didn't tell him no, didn't really want to go. But come the morning, he showed up at my house and takes me to church. Mind you, I grew up in church all of my life. And I went to church that day, and I heard a preacher preach I had never met before. And he said something at the end of his message. He said, if you're tired of living the way that you're living, if there is a hole in your heart that you just can't seem to fill, the only one that can fill that space, that void, is Jesus Christ. And mind you, I had never heard that in my whole entire life. I had heard about Jesus, but I never knew that he could come and live inside of you. Much less did I ever know the reason why he had died on the cross of Calvary. And that day he said, I want to pray for you. And I raised my hand that day, and something happened in my life that I'll never forget. Didn't experience religion. I experienced something very, very personal and intimate. I experienced the forgiveness of my sins. And the reason that I say that is because that was exactly what I found out was the reason why I didn't know how to live. That didn't allow me to learn how to live. I went home, told my wife, forget about what I told you. I want you to come to church with me next week. The week couldn't pass fast enough. Brought her with me to church. She heard the message. And at the end, the preacher said the same thing. Here's the ironic part. That man that preached was the same man that my professor mentioned 5 years before, saying that there was a preacher that was working to free drug addicts from their addiction. That man took me under his wing, and he taught me how to live. He taught me how to be a father, taught me how to be a husband. And I told him, Freddie, I want to do this. I want to do this the rest of my life. And so he began to coach me. And I'm part of a ministry that goes into the drug connections, that goes into the worst parts, the cities of our nation, that intervenes, that goes where the police won't go, and begin to tell those that are addicted about the person of Jesus Christ. It is not always received with open arms. I didn't receive it with open arms. But this is what I found out. That I didn't have a family structure problem. I found out that I had a sin problem. And here's what happened. I began to be taught what it was to be a man, what it was to be responsible to your wife, what it was to be responsible to your children. It was a schooling that I never got all of those years that I went to school. But it was a schooling that I desperately needed. And if we want to build families in America, if we want to build families all around the globe, then we have got to get into the trenches. We have got to go to the demographics that no one wants to go to. We have got to go to the people that are hurt the worst, they're not even dreaming of having any other kind of life but a life of misery. I'm privileged. I'm privileged to see miracles take place each and every day. Under the sign of our ministry that says Outcry Novario is a tagline that says, expect a miracle. And that's what happens. That's what happens at our center each and every day. Men and women coming to know the person of Jesus Christ. Then, after that, our work is to teach them about character, to teach them about responsibility, to teach them about work. And the reason that I'm amazed at the work that's taking place here by many of you in this conference that are looking at the economic side of the issue and are looking at the social side of the issue, that I realize that we've got a big team all over the world. And we're working for one purpose. We're working to build families. We're working to build families that honor God. We're working to build families to make a better community and to make a better world. I would never have had that. I would have had the American dream. I have found something a little bit better. I found a passion. I found a pursuit. I found a destiny. And all of us in San Antonio, Texas, without crying to Barrio Ministries, not only here in the United States, but all over the world, do this work each and every day. Number one, because we wouldn't have ever had this life of being able to raise families, being able to love families, if it wouldn't have been for the person of Jesus Christ. Two things have stayed with me ever since. Love God, love your family, and that's all that matters. God bless you guys.